As I climbed back into the cab, I glanced at the restroom building in my side mirror. It was then that I saw them. Figures, more than I could count, emerging from the shadows. The rain outside seemed to grow heavier, the deafening roar drowning out my racing thoughts. I couldn't help but reflect on my simple existence. I'm just a 24-year-old guy with no concrete plans or ambitions, yet I've fallen in love with the open road. My father and I converted this old VW transporter into my home on wheels over a year ago, and it's been my steadfast companion ever since. Some say I'm running away from life, but to me it feels more like I'm running towards something, though I can't quite put my finger on it. One thing that keeps me going is the thrill of the unknown, of discovering new places and faces. Over time, I've developed an acute sense for reading people's intentions, a skill that often comes in handy. I thought I was street smart, and I'd navigated through various situations with finesse. But one night at a lonely highway rest stop in the middle of nowhere, I would encounter something that would challenge even my well-honed instincts. I had pulled over at a modest rest stop nestled somewhere between the coastal gems of Byron Bay and the bustling Gold Coast. It wasn't one of those massive service centers with gleaming amenities, but a more humble spot, complete with a row of bathroom stalls, a few picnic tables, and even a small, rusty playground for the kids. The evening had painted the sky with a canvas of soft, billowy clouds, and a gentle sprinkle of rain played a soothing background melody. It seemed like the ideal place to park, catch a few hours of sleep, and continue driving later into the night. The groggy haze of my slumber receded as I awoke in the dimly lit rest stop. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled upon me. Outside, the swings swayed silently in the stillness of the night, their creaking somehow off-putting. The distant hum of passing cars and trucks on the highway filled the air, providing a faint reassurance. Hesitating, I sighed, decided to step out of my van to catch some fresh air before heading back to bed for an hour or so. The night was eerily quiet, save for the highway's distant hum. I inhaled the damp air and turned to head back to my van, but a flicker of movement arrested my attention. A dark figure, a man clad in all black, stood motionless by one of the picnic tables, his silhouette barely visible in the dim light, not far from the restrooms. A shiver ran down my spine as I couldn't help but wonder what had brought him to this desolate place in the middle of the night. As I cautiously watched the mysterious figure by the picnic table, the tension in the air grew. I saw him more clearly now, his face obscured by the shadows of a hood. My unease multiplied into heart-pounding fear when I noticed that he wasn't alone. Emerging from the restroom, another figure joined him. This one wore a Halloween mask, an unsettling grin painted upon it. It was the kind of mask that could haunt your nightmares. Their hushed conversation was inaudible, but I was certain it wasn't anything good. Before I could retreat to the safety of my van, the two figures started walking toward me, their sinister intent clear. Panic welled within me as I realized I had walked into a situation many would wish they'd never experience. Their menacing presence made the night's ominous silence deafening, and my heart pounded in my chest. It was at that moment that I knew I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. I'm not your typical trucker, not by a long shot. My friends and family never really understood why I chose this life. The endless highways, the solitude, the grit and grind. But there's something about the open road that's always drawn me in. I'm a 64-year-old trucker, and this rig is my second home. I've seen it all. The most beautiful sunsets over the horizon, the loneliest stretches of desert, and the darkest nights where the only company I have is the hum of my engine. Some might call it a lonely life, but I call it freedom. I've mostly stuck to myself for the majority of my life. Never did really enjoy mingling with people. I suppose that's why this profession is so fitting. It was one of those nights when the rain came down like a wall. The kind of torrential downpour that makes you question every life decision that led you to this very moment. My 18-wheeler rumbled along the slick, black asphalt, tires hissing against the wet surface. I was in the middle of nowhere, the kind of desolate stretch of highway where the darkness outside was nearly absolute. The only saving grace was a rest stop, a small oasis in the middle of the storm. It had all the usual amenities, bathrooms, tables, and a dimly lit neon sign that buzzed in the rain. I'd been driving for hours through the relentless rain, and the fatigue was starting to set in. It was past midnight, and I needed a break. I pulled into the rest stop and killed the engine. I could hear the heavy drumming of the rain on the roof, and it sounded almost deafening in the sudden silence. Something felt off, though. The place was deserted, which wasn't unusual at this hour, but that wasn't the source of my unease. It was the flickering neon sign. It spelled welcome, in an uneven, almost spastic rhythm, and the resulting shadows to dance across the parking lot. As I stepped out of the cab, the rain hit me like 1,000 tiny needles. I made my way to the restrooms when I noticed her. A young woman, soaked to the bone with tangled hair clinging to her face. Her clothes were ragged, as if she'd been caught in the storm for hours. She stood there, shivering, staring at the restroom doors. There was something wrong about her. Yeah, sure, she was out here soaking wet and at midnight. No, it wasn't that. It was her eyes had a vacant, distant look, and her trembling didn't seem to be from the cold alone. I had to make a quick decision. Help her or get out of there as fast as I could. The trucker in me wanted to be cautious, to stick with the well-practiced rule of avoiding strangers on the road. But my conscience got the better of me. She seemed lost, in danger. I cautiously approached and asked if she needed help. "Pardon me, madame, are you all right?" Her eyes darted to mine, and her lips trembled as she whispered, "Please, you have to take me away from here." I could hear the fear in her voice, and I couldn't just leave her alone in that forsaken place. I led her to the truck and helped her inside. As I climbed back into the cab, I glanced at the restroom building in my side mirror. It was then that I saw them. Figures, more than I could count, emerging from the shadows. The rain outside seemed to grow heavier, the deafening roar drowning out my racing thoughts. I gunned the engine and sped away from that rest stop, each mile passing like an eternity. As the young woman shivered in the passenger seat, thanking me profusely, I couldn't help but wonder what I'd just escaped and what fate might have befallen me had I not made that fateful decision to help her. It ended up these men had been following her ever since her car broke down, a few miles before the rest stop. One thing was for sure. I'd think long and hard before stopping at any rest stop in the middle of the night again. I'm a woman in my late 30s, and life has taken me down some unexpected paths. My current gig involves working the night shift at a 24-hour diner nestled beside a busy rest stop on a lonely stretch of highway. I've seen my fair share of weary travelers, truckers, and the occasional local insomniac looking for coffee and conversation to keep them awake. I've learned to read people pretty well over the years, which is a skill that serves me well in this job. But nothing could have prepared me for that night. The diner, or what some affectionately call a greasy spoon, sits just off the highway. It's the sort of place where the neon sign buzzes with promise but seldom delivers. The time was well past midnight, and the usual customers had long gone, leaving the place dimly lit and quiet. Outside, the relentless rain drummed a monotonous beat on the roof of the diner, creating a lonely soundscape punctuated by the occasional passing truck. My attention was caught by a single set of muddy footprints on the floor, leading from the entrance to the far end of the counter where I stood. I couldn't see the person who had left the prints. They were perched on a stool, their back to me. I should have noticed something was off right then, but the late hour and the rain, which had a way of distorting both time and sound, must have left me in a fog. As I approached the stranger, a chill ran down my spine. I could now see the reason for the muddy prints. His clothes were drenched, as though he'd walked for miles in the storm. His head hung low, hiding his face beneath a hood, and I could only make out a tangled mess of hair sticking out. I called out to him, asking if he was all right. He didn't respond. I offered him a menu, thinking he might appreciate a hot meal or a cup of coffee to warm up. He still didn't respond, but I saw his hands trembling beneath the counter. My instincts told me something was very wrong, and the pit of my stomach knotted with unease. Feeling increasingly unnerved, I stepped into the back room, aka the kitchen, and called the local sheriff's office and explained the situation. While on the phone, I watched as the man slowly raised his head, and what I saw still haunts me. His face was white and wet. His eyes hollow and his lips moved as if he was murmuring something, but I couldn't hear a word. It wasn't a normal conversation. It was as if he was lost in his head, like a trance. When the deputies arrived, they detained him and led him away in silence. They never told me what they found in his backpack or where they took him. The rest of the night at the diner was a blur, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd brushed against something about to go horribly wrong, or if the man was mentally ill or something. There are days I regret calling the sheriff's office, but others, I thank God I did. Hello everyone. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. I again thank you for your recent and ongoing support. With all your engagement and positive comments, it's an absolute pleasure narrating for you. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. To all the new people to the channel, welcome. Also a side note, I am currently working on a Patreon where members will be able to connect and communicate with one another. You'll be able to provide your inputs on ideas and videos, and even be able to compose some of your own, which by poll vote may be featured on the channel. Let me know in the comments if this would be something you'd be interested in. Until next time.